Well, good morning, everyone. I've got 11 o'clock on my clock here, so I think we'll go ahead and get started today. Couple kind of housekeeping notes before we get started. First of all, feel free to send questions in at any point today. Also, at the end of today's presentation, we'll encourage you if you want to unmute and ask any questions if you want. Otherwise, if you want to send them in through the chat window, that's fine as well at any point. So please do ask questions, comments, clarifications. We'd like to hear from you on those things. A couple other announcements before we get started with today. Our August monthly session will be on August 4th at 11 o'clock. So again, the first Thursday of the month. And the topic next month in August will be customer service automations that save. And Ashley Medish-McCoy, who's the director of Accelerate Montana as part of the Montana Women's Business Center, will be our presenter next week. So if you want to mark your calendars for that, that will be August 4th at 11 o'clock will be our August version of the Small Business Webinar Series. So mark your calendars for that one if you haven't already done so. Just a couple thank yous to our sponsors for this event. America's Small Business Development Centers, Montana Department of Commerce, Small Business Administration, Montana State University Extension, Montana Economic Development Association, and then we get some extra support from Grow Great Falls and also from the University of Montana as well. So thank you to each of those sponsors that help us bring this series to you at no cost. With that, I guess I will sort of introduce myself since I'm going to be today's presenter. Let me get things shared here. I also happen to be, they are recarpeting and doing some asbestos removal in my office, so I'm not at my normal setup, so I've got things moving around just a little bit. All right, let me share here. All right, hopefully everyone is seeing my screen. If somebody wants to send me a note in the chat window, that would be great. All right, thanks, Jason. Let me get my... All right, I think I'm set up here on my end of things. All right, so for today, the topic I really want to talk about is retirement plan options for small businesses. And this one is kind of near and dear to my heart in terms of what I like to teach and something that I spent a fair bit of my time doing, especially early in my career. So my name is Joel Schumacher. I do work for MSU Extension. You've seen me mostly as a host, but I do actually do some teaching myself. And the reason why I'm going to teach today, I want to tell you a little bit about my background. I do have a bachelor's degree in business finance from here at MSU. I also have a master in applied economics from here, and I am an accredited financial counselor. So that's sort of the formal things. After I graduated from college, I went to work for Janus Mutual Funds, primarily dealing with retirement plan accounts there, specifically at the individual investor level, IRAs, a little bit of SEPs as well was kind of the things that we dealt mostly with. But then I transitioned over to work for a small company called RepTech, and that was a small firm that ran about 400 retirement plans and had a couple of ERISA attorneys in our office as well. And there I served as a pension analyst, and about 50 plans were my responsibility in terms of making sure they ran, not doing investment advice, but how they were set up, making sure the plans followed by the rules, just managing the day-to-day type events. And our typical customer was a small business. We did a lot of doctor's offices, lawyers, plumbers, small shipping companies, transportation, logistics type operations. Even did some car dealerships and some small restaurants as well. So that was kind of our bread and butter clientele was working with those businesses to help them create a plan that would work for their needs. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you are some things that I experienced firsthand working in the industry. One of the things that I particularly like, and it's kind of nice now, is I'm not representing any company. I'm not selling you on a plan. I'm not trying to convince you that one plan or another is best for you. So I can hopefully be pretty unbiased and just kind of share some of the opportunities and challenges that small business owners have to make when they're considering a retirement plan that works best for what their needs and what their goals are. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I want to do one slide with some terms and some jargon on it, just to kind of simplify some things. So first of all, there's a lot of different names for retirement plans out there, and you can pretty easily be kind of caught up in sort of the mess of abbreviations and things. But there's really two main types of plans. One is a defined benefit plan. You might hear this referred to as a pension plan. This is where you work for, so many years and they take a portion of your salary and you get that for the rest of your life. We see that a lot with government workers, teachers, the military uses these type of plans, and also a lot of really large employers have these type of plans, places like Ford Motor Company and that scale of company. They can be used for small businesses, but they're pretty rare. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about those today because, again, they're really quite rare for small businesses to use unless you're a really high income company. And then there are some reasons why a pension plan might fit for you. So next up is kind of the other broad category, which are defined contribution plans, and these are by far and away the most common. Most of these are what are called 401A for qualified plans. Again, not something you're going to necessarily hear, but you might see that term as a qualified plan. 401A4 is just a code section in the law where the rules are laid out for that. But this is where 401k plans, profit sharing plans, deferred compensation plans, even things like employee stock ownership plans, whether leveraged or not, and then also simple 401ks. The rules to operate these plans are all in that code section 401, and then the different sections within it are the K and M and A and some of those kind of things. So you may hear the term 403B, and essentially these are just about mirrored rules to 401k. But these are going to be for nonprofit status. And the main difference between the rules isn't necessarily that one is better than the other, but the deductibility issue for taxable entities is different than for non-taxable entities. So in many cases, I wouldn't say that they're essentially a mirrored set of rules, primarily with the exception of the tax rules. So if you are, like I think we've had a question come here about what a 501c6 organization qualify. When you actually talk to an organization that can help you set up one of these plans, just tell them what type of entity you are and they'll be able to guide you into the correct plan. And again, I wouldn't again say one is better than the other or one's more costly than the other or that there's really particular benefits. All it is the rules match the tax code for the different types of tax entities. So don't get hung up on which one you're going to qualify for, as when you talk to one of these organizations, they're going to be able to just direct you to the one, that's going to fit for you. So that's not going to be a challenge. Whatever type of entity you are, there's going to be a viable option that's going to be similar for you to run. So, and then just you won't see as many of these obviously in the small business world, but 457 plans are governmental employers. So if you're for the state of Montana, even MSU, we do have a 457 plan option. And again, some similar rules, but again, things like tax deductions don't matter for governmental employers. And then finally, you may see some things, and we're not going to really talk about these today, what are called SEPs, a Simplified Employee Pension Plan, or a SAR-SEP, which is pretty rare, salary deferral arrangement with a SEP. And this is another type of very simple retirement plan, but all the rules are in section 408, which is where the IRA rules are. So they're really quite different than a qualified plan. They can still work for you, but they operate entirely different than kind of a traditional plan that I'm going to talk about today. So I'm not going to talk about SEPs today. We did get a question here about a simple 401k and a simple IRA. Are they the same? They're not the same. A simple 401k is really a 401k plan that has a very narrow set of options, which allows you to avoid some of the administrative components of it. And again, those rules are going to be a 401a plan, but the IRA option is going to be down with those SEPs as well. So those are different types of plans. But good question. And I'll talk a little bit at the end too about who can give you some more detailed information, like a quote or maybe even comparing, which might be best for your plan as well. All right, so enough with kind of the jargon, but I did want to lay that out and just let you know we're really going to talk about defined contribution plans, and don't get hung up about what code section things are in. the people that you partner with to help run this plan will be able to handle that for you. All right. Why are you considering a retirement plan? It's really important to ask yourself these questions before you get in. Some retirement plans can be very complex. They can be very expensive and burdensome to run. Others can be very simple to run. Um, but understanding why you're considering this can be really helpful in guiding you towards the right plan, even before you talk to a company that might be able to help you set one of these up. So most commonly, we see things like our people are using a retirement plan as a form of compensation. They're using it as a tool to retain workers, and we'll talk specifically about how that can work in a minute with company contributions, as it really is a retention tool, which might be particularly important over the last few years as we've seen such a strong labor market that has had employers competing for good employees. So, and then also, aligning a compensation package with the company values to attract the right employees. One of the things you may see is that some companies they have employees that are all about a quick buck, um, and maybe there's a lot of turnover in those industries. Salespeople that have these immediate bonuses and things. But there might be other companies that are trying to encourage really long-term employees with long-term relationships. And sometimes putting a portion of that into a retirement plan can be a way to, reward long-term employees, help them save for their retirement, ensure their financial security in the future. So it might be part of a package that aligns what you hope for your employees that match with the company values as well. And then there's tax benefits to these plans. We can defer compensation until the retirement years, which oftentimes means we're in a lower tax bracket. So it can reduce overall taxes and, of course, delay them down the road. So those are usually some of the key issues that we think about. But then specifically with your company, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Are you trying to compete with other employers? I certainly heard that a lot when I was working, that we're trying to be competitive with another company in the same industry as us, and they're offering a 401k plan. We need to offer one to stay competitive. So that's certainly a viable reason to establish one. Encourage employees to stay longer. Again, we're going to get into that a little bit more as we go along. And then, maybe help provide financial stability for retirement years. A lot of employers care a lot about their employees. And also recognizing that you or the management of your company, if your employees there, you can also participate. So certainly some of these plans were set up with at least one component as being an option for the owner to be able to save for their retirement as well. So it wasn't just for the employees, it was for the owner's benefit as well. And then, deferring income to retirement, there can be some tax benefits for that as well. So, all right. Um, Another thing to think about again while you're shopping is, how committed are you to this plan? Is this something you just want to try once? Because setting up a plan, it has its own tax ID number, it's its own entity. If you're not really quite sure, maybe that's not the best time to start. You might really want to make sure that you're committed to doing this for at least 3 to 5 or 6 years to make it worth your investment in getting it set up, getting it running. Plans may take a few years to be adapted by maybe all the employees in the plan that are interested in it. It's not all going to happen on day one. So having kind of a multi-year commitment, I think, is a good thing for the success of the plan longer term. And then I would also say to have some idea what level of employer contributions you expect to put into the plan. There are plans that don't have any employer contributions, it's simply employee money. But there's also companies that want to put in 3% of everyone's salary or 5%. I've even had companies that were well over 15% to everyone. And again, it's not necessarily that there's a right and a wrong answer, but understanding kind of the ballpark number that you might be in will help you when you're creating your plan. Create a plan with the right options that meets your needs for roughly what it is you're trying to accomplish. Employer contributions can be adjusted from year to year in most cases. So you're not necessarily locked into 3% if that's what your kind of vision was going into it. But you would probably design a plan a lot differently if you were expecting to be putting in well over 10% on a company contribution versus a company that might be looking at putting in, 2%. There would be some different setup options that would work better for the different owners trying to do those different things. So keep that kind of in the back of your mind. It's also a great idea to have some idea how many employees are going to be eligible. And then combined with that level of contributions, both on the employer side and maybe employee, when you partner with an investment company to provide the investment side of this, they're going to want to have some kind of estimate of what they expect the cash flow to be in a given year. Are there going to be 5 employees contributing on average, $3,000? So we're going to have a $15,000 contribution each year, or is this plan going to have $100,000 of contribution each year, or maybe even a higher number? They're going to price the investments to some extent based on how much cash flow is going through this plan. So that'll be something when you get a bid for it from a company, they're going to want that number and have some idea of what the asset base is going to be. So. And then the last thing is, you as an owner, probably you didn't get into whatever business you're in to manage a retirement plan, but you're going to have to spend a little bit of time, making sure the plan runs correctly. You're going to hire someone likely to do the bulk of the management, but have a little bit of an idea who's going to be the one that's going to make that commitment on the employer side too. Working with whatever firm it is you hire, making sure the reports get signed and filed on time. So just kind of meeting a couple times a year, with that company or having a phone call with them to make sure things are still going, make sure that new employees are given the appropriate paperwork to sign up, just kind of the logistical things. And in some cases, you're going to pass those off to your payroll person. And in other cases, those will be things that, maybe the owner themselves will actually do. All right, so let's talk just a little bit here about how employer-sponsored plan works. First of all, the IRS created these really broad rules. I like to think about this like a football game. There's all kinds of plays that a coach can pick. That's what the IRS has done. Then it's kind of up to the employer, who acts a little bit like the coach, to pick where within all those broad rules that their plan is going to live. They're going to create a plan document that's going to define kind of the day-to-day options of the plan. They're going to give a summary plan description out to the employees. This is going to be 1 to 8 pages, written in pretty simple language, and that's going to help the employees understand that plan. The plan document is probably going to be 30 to 60 pages, and it's probably going to refer back to another document that likely most of you will never see, a plan that has been actually reviewed, which might be 400 to 800 pages in length as well. But so there's kind of all these layers, but again, you're probably only going to deal with these 2. That plan document is going to define who can participate and when they get to participate. So some companies, the day you're hired, you're eligible. Others, it's every January 1st, people can enter. There may be a minimum age requirement. It's quite common of either 18 or 21. It can't be higher than those 2 ages. Might be that you have to work there for 6 months before you're eligible, or 1 year. All of those kind of things are some possibilities. And then they're also going to define what is compensation for the purposes of this plan. And just a quick example, I had some companies that had people with a base salary and bonuses. I had one company that excluded the bonuses from their definition of salary. So that was actually at the request of the employees. It was a car dealership, so everybody participated in the 401k based on their just base salary. But these salespeople that were getting bonuses, that they still got paid that money, but they didn't contribute funds towards the 401k from that, nor did they get any company contributions based on their bonuses. On a different scale, I worked with a restaurant that gave employees $100 a quarter to buy clothes, black pants and black shoes primarily to fit with the restaurant's dress code. And again, they excluded those extra $100 towards clothing from their definition of compensation. So most of them, they just use the same definition that goes into their W-2, but there can be some reasons why you might want to adjust that a little bit. One thing about employee contributions, they do have to be made via payroll deduction, and the contributions are typically tax deductible. Now, via payroll deduction usually comes in as an issue to just one group of people, and that is the owner. Sometimes the owner wants to take a draw late in the year and then contribute a whole bunch, and they really need to, or even write a check towards the end of the year, and they really do need to do that via payroll deduction. So that can be something to watch for. If you're an owner and contributing, you should be doing it on a regular basis. So the IRS does have a maximum contribution level. This year it's $20,500 for employee contributions. If you're over 50, you can add another 6,500. So this is way higher than the IRA limit. So this is one of the reasons that owners sometimes want to start one of these, is to help themselves save for retirement, because maybe they want to go over and above what the IRA would allow them to do. So, and again, this is the employee contribution limit here. Employer contributions, again, employers don't have to contribute. And employers often can change the contribution they make from year to year. We saw this especially with some of the smaller businesses we work with. The company had a good year, maybe they contributed 5%. Maybe other years they only contributed 3% and adjusted a little bit based on the profitability of the company or the cash flow. Employer contributions can be made each pay period. They can be made quarterly. They can be made at the end of the year. So kind of once you know, they do have to be contributed to the plan within 2.5 months after the year end, which matches up with your tax return for corporations as well. So if it's a calendar year plan, all employer contributions have to be in by March 15th. Employee contributions, they actually have to be put in each pay period. So essentially the IRS says if this is money that would have been paid to the employee, on say every 2-week basis, then they also need to be put into the plan on the same basis as well. So, but there is some flexibility there, whether it's based on profitability or just in terms of cash flow. And I have had employers that wanted to do it each quarter, so it was kind of like a regular bill that they could cash flow all year. I had other companies that waited until the end of the year and then like to contribute it all at once they knew how profitable the year was. Profit sharing contributions are really common, and this is where employees receive, say 2% or 4% or a flat dollar amount to every employee that's eligible, and it doesn't matter whether that employee put any of their own money into the plan. And also, just a small kind of note, the company does not have to make a profit for you to make a profit sharing contribution. They just simply share the name. This is just a contribution that everyone shares in. And again, it has nothing to do with what the profitability of the business looks like in terms of their tax return. So very common there as well. Another very common type of employer contribution is called a matching contribution. And matching contributions are based on some kind of formula that's known to employees. And then they match a percentage of the employee's contribution. So if the employee puts in, say, 3%, maybe the company matches dollar for dollar the first 2%. A really common one would be 100% of matching contribution up to the first 4%. Sometimes that's called a safe harbor matching contribution. Allows you to avoid some non-discrimination testing. And it might be then that an employee that contributes 6% of their own money will still just receive 4%. That's the maximum the employer contributes. An employee that chooses to contribute 3% under that formula would just get a 3% match from the employer as well. So it's a little bit driven by the employee's choices. You can match, 50% of say 10% to encourage employees to contribute more of their own funds. You can also have formulas that have different rates. So $100 for dollar on the first 3%, 50 cents on the dollar for the next 2%. Really common as well to have some type of matching formula like that as well. There are some pretty interesting things you can do with matching contributions that allow employees to drive their own contribution levels. We saw this a lot with attorneys where you had different partners, maybe a young partner that was in his 20s, paying off student loans, buying into the practice, didn't have a lot of cash flow, and maybe another partner that was in his 60s with kids grown, loans paid off, house paid off. There are some unique designs that can help benefit multiple partners in a business like that as well. Now, I mentioned earlier, and this is one point I kind of make about trying to keep employees around and using a retirement plan as a tool to do that. Employer contributions can be subject to what's called vesting or a vesting schedule. And vesting is based on the number of years of service that you've earned with the company. And a year of service is typically defined as a year in which you work 1,000 or more hours for the company. And that's roughly half time. So each year, and it is based on the plan year, so it could be calendar years. So somebody that's hired in October might not get to 1,000 hours that first year. But just for the employer contributions, you can have this vesting schedule, say for if you have a 120 vesting schedule, after 1 year, the employee would be 20% vested in that company contribution. After 2 years, they would go up to 40%. If that employee were to leave after 2 years, they would only take 40% of the employer's contribution with them. The other 60% would revert back to the plan, and your plan document would say what would happen to those funds. So it encourages employees to stay with the company longer. That's kind of one of the ideas. So a vesting schedule is a common tool that's used for that. Vesting schedules can't be longer than 7 years. And there's a couple other rules. You don't have to use a vesting schedule though. Some have immediate vesting. So every dollar that goes into an employee's account from the company, it's theirs if they were to leave the next day. So that's just a tool that some employers use to encourage longer term employees. All right. And again, here's just an example of how that vesting would work. You know, an employee works for a company for 3 years and then leaves to go take a different job. If the company had a 120 vesting schedule, this employee would be 60% vested, getting 20% for each year that they worked there. So if the employee had put in 4,600 of their own funds, again, plus any earnings that happened, and then let's say the employer matched half of that, so they had $2,300 in their account. So the statement they received kind of on their last day of work would say that they've got $6,900 in their retirement account. So when the employee leaves, they may request their funds be transferred to an IRA, but the amount they're going to get to take to their IRA is only $5,980. So they'll take all of their employee contributions, which is $4,600 in this case, plus 60% of that 2,300, and that's the amount that they get to take. The other portion, about $900 in this case, reverts back to the plan, and the plan will say what happens to that fund. Sometimes it's allocated among other current employees as another company contribution. Sometimes it's used to pay fees that are incurred by the plan. So, but the plan document will say what will happen to do that. So this is just a tool, again, to try to oftentimes encourage employees to stay with the employer longer. We actually had a question come in on that. Good question here. I've heard that you can have different vesting schedules. Is that true? You can have different vesting schedules for different types of employer contributions. So it's possible that your matching contributions would be subject to a vesting schedule, but your profit sharing contributions are subject to a different vesting schedule or have immediate vesting as well. That sometimes happens with respect to safe harbor contributions as well. So yes, very common, certainly can be done for different types of employer contributions. Let's talk just a little bit about investments. Defined contribution plans, in almost all cases, the employees or participants in the plan get to select their investments from a menu of kind of pre-selected options. So for those of you that have been in one, you might see somewhere between 5 and maybe 25 investment choices. 20 plus years ago when I was more active in this area, or 20 years ago, oftentimes employers had like 50 or 60 choices. But they kind of changed some of the fiduciary responsibilities that the plan sponsor or the employer is responsible for providing enough education to the employee that they can make a choice. So if you're going to offer 60 different investment choices, you have to offer enough education that an employee could make a choice between those. So as a result of that, many plans narrowed down their investment choices, and you oftentimes have one or maybe two investment options within a category, say international stocks or small cap stocks. So it narrowed it down some to kind of simplify things for employees and for the plan sponsors. Usually mutual funds or some type of insurance product that acts a lot like a mutual fund is what are the choices that are given to employees. So not a lot of direct stock trading takes place within retirement plans. The investment returns are the employee's responsibility. So the employer in these has a responsibility to make sure the plan has filed its tax return and those kind of things, make whatever contributions they promise to make. But then whether the market does great or poorly, it is almost always just purely the responsibility of the employee then. So great market doesn't do anything for the employer specifically, neither does a poor market. All of that is on the employee side. All right, so I think we're right at 11:30, which is what I was trying to keep it to. Do we have some questions? Oh, excellent question. Where would I find out more information about actually finding out how much it costs and who can operate a plan for me? Yeah, so that's a really good question. Usually, retirement plans are run with a combination of a couple different entities involved. So, oftentimes, most of you probably have an accountant. Sometimes your accounting firm can actually operate or do the administrative side of some very simple plans. Not all accounting companies do that, but oftentimes they have a partnership or know who in your area is providing that service in terms of kind of operating and managing the plan. The other entity that they might reach out to or that you might work with directly is an investment firm, whether that be someone like American Funds, Janus directly with the investment firm. Um, Reach out, talk to your accountant, talk to other businesses. I would say in your chamber of commerce, talk to what other folks are doing, and they'll probably give you an idea of who's at least in the market in your community. In terms of local representation, Montana is a pretty small market for these businesses. So um, like the company that I worked for, we had 15 employees and we ran roughly 400 retirement plans. So if you're in like my hometown of Malta, that's the company that I worked for. We could have handled, everything in town, you know, with one of our staff, just because of the way that the size of our community. So you'll have to ask. There are a number of companies that service a wide range of areas. And again, because you're probably only going to meet face to face with kind of the setup company once or twice, it's not unusual. And we, in fact, used to do that when I worked in the business. We would make a trip once or twice a year to visit our northern clients or our eastern clients, and then beyond that we would work via phone, so they don't necessarily have to be directly in your community. And there are national companies that provide services directly from say a call center. um, the type of firm that I actually worked for was a little bit different. We actually worked as what's called a third party administration firm. So we partnered with an investment company to provide the investments. We oftentimes partnered with an accounting firm to do the accounting, and then we actually ran the day-to-day operations of the firm, kind of serving as a liaison between the three. So when we would put in a bid for a plan, the bid would kind of be priced, with all three of our services combined, laid out separately, but it was kind of a package deal with the several of us offering that product. Again, there are companies that do all those services as one bundle thing. So there's a number of different ways. And then we had a couple questions about fees. There's a couple different ways that fees can be charged. Um, and let me kind of start with these. So one is that there's an investment fee. So a percentage of, for every $100,000 you have invested, they take X percent per year. And that fee essentially then is paid out of every single participant in the plan. Now, all investments have fees, but some will get kind of higher or lower fees depending on the volume, depending on how you're pricing things. So some of the fees are going to be a percentage of the assets invested. Other fees, say for the company that I worked for, we had a base fee per year. So things have changed a little over time, but we might charge $1,000 per year for a plan to operate on a normal year, plus $40 or $50 per person that participates in the plan. So if you have a 10 employee plan, we might charge $1,000 base fee plus $100 for each of those 10 employees that work there, or $50 for each of those 10 employees. And they'll bid that based on the size of the plan, the complexity of the plan. And it's a little hard you have to be careful when you're comparing these to make sure you have apples to apples comparisons, because some investment firms will put way more of those fees into the asset bases, essentially have the employees paying for them. Other companies like to have relatively few fees passed on to the employees and want to pay for more of those things up front. So when you get a quote, especially if you get one from several different companies, make sure you ask about both types of fees in terms of things that are paid as a check from the company, things that are paid as a percentage of the assets under investment. But those are the two common ways that you're going to see fees. Now, we also had a question a little more specific about what's the company's cost for a plan. Okay, so first of all, there might be an initial setup fee that could come out. Could be anywhere from 0 to maybe 3,000 or 4,000, depending on what type of plan you're establishing, what kind of that initial setup is going to be. Generally, it's not too big of a fee, and oftentimes it is 0. But that's going to be one fee. And then you've got your ongoing fees. And for that fee, they're probably going to, do your compliance testing. They may file your Form 5500, which is the tax return that belongs to your plan. They're also going to make sure that your plan stays in compliance with new rules. So Congress might have a new rule that says, oh, this matching contribution is now higher than it used to be. We need to give a notice to the employees. They'll provide those kind of services for you. And again, it's hard to give a really good range because the complexity of these plans can change a lot. So can the type of plan, type of employer. So I had companies that, let's say in a law firm where they had, 5 attorneys and 5 some kind of support staff. And they might have had one person leave each year and one person get hired. But other than that, they were relatively stable. So there's really the day-to-day management of that plan was very simple. The employees were all set up. We didn't have a lot of new employees to educate, provide paperwork to get them signed up. That plan was really those type of plans were easy to run. I also ran a retirement plan for a fast food restaurant that owned about 90 different fast food restaurants in multiple states. And employees were working there for 4 months and quitting and leaving and coming back and going to work from one restaurant owned by this company to another restaurant owned by this company that were all part of the same thing. And just the day-to-day logistics of running a plan like that were much more complex. And the fees per person were much higher to run that type of plan. So you're going to get, some of your bid is going to come down to what type of company you are. And then the last thing is about just what you're trying to do with the plan. If you're simply doing everyone's eligible, everybody's in, and you're doing a 4%, matching contribution every year, and you can provide clean payroll records to them, the price is going to be relatively inexpensive. If you're doing an employee stock ownership plan with company stock that isn't publicly traded, that has to get valued each year, there's just more complexities, and those type of plans are going to be more expensive to run. So the simpler the plan, usually the lower the type of the fees that you're going to incur. So we did have a question about whether the costs for a simple 401k are less than those of a regular 401k. And generally I would say yes, but I wouldn't necessarily narrow it to just simple versus all 401ks. Simple just happens to be on kind of the low end in terms of complexity, but there's lots of steps in between that 401ks may offer in terms of complexity and options that the employer offers to their employees, such as plan loans, even in different investment options that might be available to them. So generally, yeah, that's one of the advantages of a simple 401k or even a safe harbor 401k is by following some rules to keep it relatively simple, the administrative burden should be a lot less, and you should get a lower quote in terms of that. So another question, looks like we've got quite a few here coming in. What are some common mistakes that business owners make in setting up a retirement plan? What are some of the pitfalls that are avoidable? So a couple things that I saw in the years, the commitment of the owner and kind of the reason why they're doing it matters a lot to the success of the plan. So simple example, a plumbing company, they've never had a retirement plan before. They got about 20 employees. And the owner wanted to be more competitive. He'd seen some of his long-term employees retire and not have anything saved for retirement. Came in, started a 401k plan, had a 4% matching contribution from the company, had the investment broker come out, talk about what the investment was. They had someone talk about what the tax savings would be. And he said, I'm participating myself. And here's why, to help me save for my retirement. And I want to see you all have a better retirement years as well. And lots of people signed up. They were committed to the plan. Most people signed up for it at some level because it is optional for people to sign up. And that plan was really very successful, and it accomplished kind of the owner's, kind of goals of being more competitive compensation package, helping his employees save for retirement. On the other end of the spectrum, I ran a retirement plan for a car dealership, and the owner said, my accountant told me we had to have this because everybody else is offering one. Would you set it up and run it? So they set one up. They had a somewhat similar match program, and the owner said, everybody else said we needed one of these, so here it is. Joel's going to tell you how you sign up for it. And he walked out and left the room. The attitude of the owner passed on to how that plan operated. The first plan was very successful. The plan at the car dealership, very few people participated in, very few people thought very highly of, even though they were actually somewhat similar plans in terms of how they were set up in terms of the employee benefits. So that's one thing I would say is, come in with a commitment and the right attitude to start it, and that plan will probably be successful on the longer term. So that's kind of the one thing I would say. The second thing I would say, especially around your initial sign-up period, if you've just started one for the first time, see if you can get your investment advisor to come out, and they usually will, to talk to your employees about the investment choices. In the future, beyond that initial thing, it oftentimes is handled, via the internet or via phone. But if you can get someone to come out that first time and help explain the investment choices, that can be really helpful as well. And then on an ongoing basis, making sure there's someone at the company, whether it's the owner, whether it's the head of your payroll / accounting person, that makes a point to share that information with new employees, tell them about the benefits, tell them how it works, and then you'll continue to get good sign up as you bring new employees on. So those are kind of the things that I guess I would highlight with respect to that. And then looks like there's one more question here. Would a simple IRA be less expensive and less administrative concerns than a simple 401k? Simple IRA doesn't have the tax plan requirement. Absolutely. Simple IRAs have very, very few choices in terms of how they operate. So you follow these very simple rules that are kind of cookie cutter, and then you have very few administrative things to deal with. If you're not necessarily committed to doing this for multiple years, a simple IRA is definitely a great place to start. So that's by far and away kind of the simplest option to get going. But if you need more flexibility or more options beyond that, that's where a 401k is going to have a lot more flexibility and choices and options. So simply least expensive and least administrative hassles would be the simple IRA. Also, definitely the fewest choices. And also flexibility to meet your needs would be with that as well. So if you want more flexibility, it's going to cost a little more, but that's where a qualified plan like a 401k would come into that as well. So excellent question. And then I guess I didn't mention this at all. One thing about simple IRAs, your accountant can help you a little bit in terms of getting them set up, but then you're probably going to work directly with an investment company as the other partner. There won't be a role for kind of the third-party administration firm like I used to work with in the middle, because again, there's no administrative stuff to deal with kind of between the two. The accountant can help you on one side of things with making sure it's reported correctly on your taxes. The investment company can help you follow the very basic rules that there are for the simple IRAs on that side of it. So you kind of go from sort of a three-legged team to a two-legged team in terms of offering that. So again, it can be a great way to get started with a simple IRA before maybe thinking about a qualified plan such as a 401k. All right, any other questions? All right. Well, again, feel free to reach out to me. If you've got some follow-up questions, be happy to visit with you some more about some of these things. And mark your calendars. August 4th at 11 o'clock will be our next session in this series. And we'll have Ashley Medish-McCoy talking about customer service automations that save. Have a great day, everyone.